Tonight, the year ends how it began. More women add their voices to a national movement to fix Parliament's toxic work culture. Are our leaders listening? And we'll explore all the defining issues of 2021. Welcome to the final Q&A of the year. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm David Speers and we're coming to you live from Melbourne tonight. And joining me on the panel, comedian Arj Barker, singer-songwriter Missy Higgins, who I'm delighted to say will be performing for us later as well. The Executive Director of the Institute of Public Affairs, John Roskam, presenter of 10 News First and Studio 10, Narelda Jacobs, and founder of the Resilience Project, Hugh van Cuylenburg. It's wonderful to have you all here in the room tonight. Now remember, you can stream us live on iView and all the socials. Quanda is the hashtag. Please join the debate. We can publish your comments on screen from Facebook, Instagram, YouTube and Twitter. And our first question tonight comes from Toby Heiniger.
Thank you. On Tuesday, the Sex Discrimination Commissioner, Kate Jenkins, released her report about workplace culture in Parliament. That same afternoon, a male senator from the Coalition Party, David Van, was accused of making animal noises at Tasmanian Independent Senator Jackie Lambie while she was speaking during question time. How can we have any hope that our politicians will take direct action on these recommendations from the Jenkins report if this kind of behaviour continues to happen from our elected representatives?
So David Van, he denied growling at Jackie Lambie, but he did apologise for doing something. Narelda, let's come to you first on this. From what we've seen this week, do you think those Jenkins recommendations are being taken seriously?
They're going to have to be taken seriously because, as you said in the intro, we began with women chanting "enough is enough" at the beginning of the year, and that's exactly what we've seen at the end of the year, and particularly today and with Kate Jenkins' report. And what struck me is that the perpetrators of the harassment and everything that Kate laid out in the report have been people typically groomed by society to succeed, and some of them groomed specifically to go into politics. Some of them even probably to be prime ministers. How's that going for us? It's a society problem. It's a whole of society problem. And we imagine a society then that grooms people that up until now have been told that they can't go into politics, that there are obstacles in the way, you know, that they want to go, but it's not for you. You know, imagine if people who want to make a change go into politics, and that's what we're going to be seeing in the next generation of politicians.
It's about the message that goes through to that next generation. Look, he wasn't the only one apologising. The Greens Senator Lydia Thorpe also apologised for saying to Liberal Senator Holly Hughes, "At least I keep my legs closed." It's really been a shocking week in terms of parliamentary behaviour. Missy, do you think anything's really changed this year?
As far as in Parliament?
That behaviour in Parliament in particular?
I think that it's going to be something that's a slow change as far as, you know, more and more women are getting the courage to stand up. And as, you know, Grace Tame and Brittany Higgins have shown us, you know, we're now in this kind of generation where these young women are feeling like they can stand up and call out abuse and they're not going to be shut down. And in fact, they are strong enough to start movements because there are so many women that have had the same experiences in their workplace, and they're looking to Parliament to show them, you know, the blueprint of how a workplace should look. You know, it should be the pinnacle of workplaces, Parliament, but it is so disappointing to all of us to look at that and go, well, even they've got it wrong. You know, even Parliament is rife with abuse. So I think, yeah, like Narelda said, they're going to have no choice after this, especially because this report is so specific in its recommendations, and it's very pragmatic, and it's going to be very useful, I think, because, you know, there's very specific things that they're going to need to carry out.
We also saw today Alan Tudge stood aside from the ministry and an investigation launched after his former staffer, who he had a consensual relationship with, accused him of emotional abuse and on one occasion physically kicking her out of bed. These are claims he denies. But just going back to Toby's question, John, to you on this, you've worked in that building, you're a former Liberal staffer. When are we going to see a better standard in Parliament?
Well, as you said, David, I've worked in Parliament, and Parliament is far from the pinnacle of a good workplace. You have politicians on both sides who are terrific at stacking branches, but can't manage, can't lead, wouldn't find a lower middle management position in the private sector. You have a work culture where you start at 6 a.m, you finish at midnight, you are making massive decisions on people's lives, and you have a degree of disregard for human relations. You have a massive power imbalance. You have women issues. And then on top of that, you have a whole question of respect between ministers and MPs and their staff and the public. So I think this year we have seen a good discussion about the people we vote for starting to act better, treat us better and treat each other better.
Or men issues, I guess, as some have correctly pointed out.
And they are absolutely men who are wielding this power.
Hugh, you work with a lot of sporting clubs as well, and some of these problems we do see in the footy codes in particular. What can be done to change the culture when it comes to attitudes towards women and treatment of women?
Yeah, I just want to jump on that really good question before. I just feel like, I mean, I'm not an expert on politics like John is, but I am an expert on how I feel, and I just feel so let down by politicians at the moment. I feel like this time more than ever, like this is such a crisis we're in all over the country, you know, and you open the paper and you want inspiration, you want to hear what we're doing to fix the problems, and you read this rot. I just think we deserve, as Australians, I just think we deserve so much better than we're currently getting. So, yeah, I think I agree with it, you know, what everyone said.
And there are, you know, unique circumstances when it comes to Parliament and the fact that they're elected and so on, but if you're trying to change attitudes at an individual level, what have you experienced as a successful approach?
Yeah, okay. So sporting clubs, I've seen some really beautiful stuff happen, and I can only comment on what I've seen. You know, I think the younger generation of boys, especially coming through sporting clubs, I see some really special stuff. I had a terrific club, Port Adelaide. A 19-year-old kid got up and spoke about his sister's struggles with addiction, the fact she'd gone missing for a while, and he did that in front of a room full of 45 men, and they all got up and hugged him at the end of it. A lot of tears in the room, and I was so moved by that. And one of the senior players one of the coaches who's in his 40s said that never would have been okay 20 years ago. And I just feel like times are definitely changing. And when I saw that, and I saw those men giving this 19-year-old a hug, it gave me great hope for the future.
Arj, do we have a particular problem with our politics in Australia compared to the US, or is this a problem everywhere?
First, I just want to say, wow, this show is really serious, isn't it?
So far. The night's young.
I mean, I'll get used to it, but the reason I'm here is because had I never seen the show, and I got an email from your producer saying you want to be on the show, and I was hanging out with Akmal, the comedian Akmal, at the time, and I said, do you think I should do it? And he said, oh yeah, you'll love it. It's just like Good News Week. And so I think he's at home laughing right now. I'm pretty good, but listen, Hugh talked about being let down by politicians. I mean, try living in America for the last 4 years. I mean, what a train wreck, and it's not over yet. In fact, it may be getting worse. I don't know, but absolutely, politicians they've been running amok, probably for decades, and maybe now because we're in the age of information, and more people are getting heard, which is a great thing, and I think the public maybe is getting more angry and wants change. So I don't think it happens quickly. I think social evolution is slow, and it doesn't go automatically. But I'm hopeful too.
I think I agree with you, Hugh. I think to be able to change, for an individual to change their behaviour, you need to really get vulnerable with yourself and admit that there is something to change in the first place. And that's what we don't see from our politicians. We don't see a vulnerability.
Ever.
We see a face, and we see them defending and attacking.
Catchphrases.
There's never that vulnerability. And there is so much rot in Parliament. You know, there is so much rot in that building that I think, you know, we all know what it looks like when we get a COVID deep clean. I think we need to go in there with PPE that is made of just decency and just have a deep clean of that building. and then have elders, traditional owners, go in and do a smoking cleansing of the entire
There you go. There you go. All right. Well, our next question comes from Melinda McPherson.
Hi, my question is for Missy Higgins. 2021 has been a year of incredibly brave women speaking up and speaking out about cultures that harm and minimise us. I have a 17-year-old daughter who's on the cusp of stepping into a music career, and while I'm very excited about that, I'm also wary about what she might find when she steps into that career. I wondered what advice you might have for young women who want to move into the music industry and what things you think still need to change.
Missy.
Well, I'm excited for you because it's the best job in the world. I mean, what advice would I have? I think I've been very lucky in that I've been surrounded by mostly really good people in my career, and I was lucky early on to find representation that really had my best interest at heart. So the most important thing is finding representation that you really, really trust, you know, with your gut. You always need to listen to your gut. And there's always, as there was for me, there's always men who are going to be telling you that you need to, you know, I had men telling me that I was going to need to dress a certain way, you know, if I'm going to get into this business, I'm going to have to look a certain way, sound a certain way. And, you know, I was a pretty headstrong kid and I just stayed true to who I was. And, you know, maybe I had a bit too much bravado at the time, but it served me well, you know. So I think I'm very happy that I did have that confidence in myself. I thought, you know what, I've actually got talent. I don't need to use my sexuality to sell my music. So listening to your instinct, listen to your body and what it's telling you when you meet these people. What still needs to change? There's still a big power imbalance between men and women in the industry, as most industries. There's a lot of industries that are still very much male dominated, and that's where we need to shift that power imbalance, because that's when problems start to happen. So I'm really hopeful for future generations of women coming up in the music industry, because as I was saying before, so many young women have the confidence now to stand up and they know they're not going to be shut down. So I think you'll do great.
Let me come back to you, Melinda. It's Jada, isn't it?
Yeah.
So can I just ask you, you know, someone who's 17 years old, what are the people like Grace Tame and Brittany Higgins this year? How have they impacted on you?
I honestly think that the movements that they've been involved in are incredible, and they're really brave for standing up and everything that they've done. It's obviously a very confronting thing to do, and it's very conflicting, because on the one hand, it's so important to stand up for the other women who have experienced this and who need to be believed and heard, but it can also come at a great cost, and I think that needs to change. And
so you're a vocalist and a composer.
Yeah.
How do you feel about stepping into, you know, a professional career in music?
Well, obviously, it's very scary. I think there's been a lot of positive change in the music industry, but I do think that there's a long way to go. You know, there's still a big imbalance. I think that it's really important to look up to women role models such as Missy Higgins, who, you know, composes and sings just as I do. And I think that it's really important for women to stick together.
Yeah. So any further advice there for Jada?
I think you're going to do great. You know, I don't think you need to be scared going into this industry, because the power imbalance is still very much towards men, but that is changing, and people like you getting into the industry is going to change that. And there's a lot of really, really great men that work in the industry as well, you know. So, yeah, I think as long as you keep your head strong and you believe in yourself and surround yourself with strong women as well, I think that's very important, yeah.
All right, thanks. And thanks, Jada. Great question and good luck. Let's get to our next question. It comes from Cam Vale.
Hi, panel. I'm a moderate user of social media and posting on social media, but surely the reforms put forward this week to to call out anonymous trolls and really reform social media is a chance for national leadership and really collaborative leadership where the issue shouldn't get bogged down in left versus right debates and just should be a chance to show genuine leadership to reform an area that is desperately in need of reform.
Yeah, thanks, Cam. I'll come to you first, Hugh, on this. So the PM wants to unmask anonymous trolls on social media.
Yeah.
What do you think? Would this be a good thing?
Yeah, absolutely. Was it Cam, was it? Is that right? Yeah, great question. I mean, there are so many issues with social media, Cam. Like that's one of the big ones. You know, I think addiction's another really big one. I was at the playground with my mum the other day. Oh, sorry, my son was there as well. So it was me and my mum and my son. But we were we didn't go to the swings with my mum.
No judgment.
No, it's fine if I do. And I got my phone out and I checked my emails, and my mum gave me this really disapproving look. And it was. And I realised what I was doing, and I said, "Sorry, Mum, yeah, I've got to be better for him." And she said, "No," she said, "I'm actually not. You know, I don't feel sorry for him. I feel sorry for you and parents of your generation." She said, "When I was your age and you were his age," she said, "I saw everything you saw. I heard everything you heard. I smelt everything you smelt because I was there with you every step of the way. But you're not with him at the moment." And it made me realise that there are so many problems, you know, beyond that. I mean, I haven't answered your question. I've just told a story, but I do think.
That must have been awkward when you were dating.
How do you mean?
If your mom's there the whole time.
Oh,
They're jokes. Sorry.
I like it.
I just didn't get it. Sorry, it was a good joke. I didn't get it.
Look, Cam's, and that's a real problem. Too much addiction to the screen, right? And it's always in your pocket. But Cam's question too is about the sort of abuse online.
Yeah, I mean the trolling thing. I think one of the problems with social media is we have these. We sort of yell at each other, and it's easy to do it when you're on a social media platform. I had a really wonderful woman, Darcy Vesio, who plays footy for Carlton in the AFLW. We have a podcast called The Imperfects, and one of the formats is called the Vulnerability Tea House. We have music playing. We tried to create like a tea house kind of feel. One of her parents is of Asian descent, and she messaged me and said, "I just feel like it's sort of cultural appropriation." And so we had a really good conversation. We actually spoke, just the two of us, just talked to each other. That's not true, actually. We did voice messages to each other. I don't know why we didn't call each other. We did voice messages. We heard the intonation of each other's tone. It was a really productive conversation. We really got somewhere with it. But if someone had written something on our, you know, if she'd written on my wall, I would have felt the pressure to sort of win that conversation and kind of say, no, this is, and try and win that argument. I think we try and, when it's in the public forum, try and win arguments rather than actually listen. And we've got to get better at non-judgmental listening.
Yeah. Well, Cam's question is about.
I haven't answered it at all. Sorry.
What the Prime Minister's put on the table is, he's promising legislation that will force the Twitter and Facebook and so on to unmask people who are posting defamatory stuff online. John, what do you reckon about that idea?
Look, social media can be a great force for good. It has been a great force for democracy through parts of the world, but exactly as we've heard, it's replaced social interaction. We've forgotten that we can turn social media off. I'm not on Facebook. I'm not on Twitter. I'm sceptical about what the Prime Minister is suggesting because not every solution rests on the government. It is for how we treat ourselves. It is to remember we can turn our phone off. It is to understand that if we abuse someone, it has consequences for them and for us. The idea that the government is going to regulate our social interaction, I am very uncomfortable with. Acknowledging that there are challenges, but I'm not sure this is the way to go.
But just to that point you're suggesting there, why should the person being abused have to run away from social media, turn it off? Shouldn't the responsibility lie on the person doing the abusing on social media to stop that behaviour?
Yes, it should, but is that then the role of the government, or is that the role of the platform, or is that the role of their family?
The platforms aren't doing much about this, are they?
Well, then you get the platforms to do it, but the idea that the government can then effectively censor what we say to each other.
And that's another issue. Can the government?
But it's an important question. It's a fine line between abuse, misinformation, and then having a different point of view from the rest of the community. And that's what I'm concerned about. There is abuse, there is vile abuse, but I'm concerned about the idea that the first response is the government should regulate.
Arj, do you use much social media? Do you ever get any abuse on social media and trolling?
Yeah, occasionally. I get mostly nice, friendly things, but maybe 1 out of 500 messages is negative, and of course...
You're doing better than me then.
That's the one. Yeah, well, maybe 1 out of 200, but that's the one that I'll think about. I'll notice more than all the nice things, because that's human nature. I think that's evolutionary. But, I have to agree a little bit with John. I think the platforms, they have terms of use on them. It says, you can't do this, you can't do that. And they're the ones that have the ability to monitor this. So I think more pressure on them to do a better job. But at the end of the day, the internet's always going to be, it's the internet. It is the Wild West. If they're not there, they can find you another way. And I think it's about people hopefully developing a strong self-esteem, which isn't easy for everyone. People are more sensitive than other people, but it's like, I don't know. I think it's a tricky one, but the internet's always going to be full of a-holes, to be honest.
Yeah, well, Missy, your dad copped an almighty social media pile on. He's a doctor here in Melbourne. This was early in the pandemic. He came back from the US, was treating patients before he realised he had COVID. And there was an almighty storm about that. What was that like?
Oh, it was horrible for him. He had a bit of a sniffle, so he took a couple of days off work, and then the sniffle went away, so he went back to work. He didn't have anything even close to COVID symptoms. And then he just had an inkling, so he took a test, and he found out he had it. And then, he was just thrown under the bus, I think. He was accused of reckless behaviour and knowingly infecting patients. It was just ridiculous.
How did it shape your views of social media at the time? What happened there? And I guess your own experiences.
Oh, I think it was mostly the health minister, Jenny, what's her name, that I had a problem with. She was the one that, Makakis or whatever it is. She was really in my bad books for a while, I tell you what.
She's no longer the health minister.
So, the good thing that happened out of all that was that he was just bombarded with physical letters of support and love. And he actually said to me, his exact words were, I didn't realise I had so many friends. People, patients and other doctors reached out to him and everyone gave him their support. And doctors that he'd never met were writing to him going, this was ridiculous. We would have done the exact same thing. So actually, ultimately, I think it was a positive thing.
Yeah, and Narelda, what do you think about trying to stop the trolls on social media?
It's been really upsetting to see certain people trolled for doing their job well, and I'm talking about journos now. When you see the names that are trending and you go in there and you see the really vile things that people are saying about highly respected journalists in this country that drive them off the platform, and they're people that I want to hear from. They're the very people I want to hear from that make this country better. Because they're telling the truth, they're truth tellers. It's their job to do that. So I think to be able to unmask the trolls is a good thing.
Yeah, I'm all for it too.
You think it's a good idea?
Yeah.
There are many reasons why, legitimate reasons to be anonymous on social media, whether you're perhaps a public servant who wants to blow the whistle on something, whether you're a domestic violence victim, but that's different to being a troll and
what about the anonymous trolls that have affected the outcomes of elections too? There's the Russian bots and whatever that kind of thing really needs to be stopped, because that's very, very dangerous. They're major corporations that are buying thousands and thousands of false opinions and trying to disrupt democracy with their tweets and their posts. So I think that's the most dangerous thing, and I think if they can be uncovered for what they are, that would be a really helpful thing for our democracy.
All right. Our next question is video, and it comes from Lauren Dalrymple in Engadine, New South Wales.
How do we protect the rich literature, stories and texts of the past from the cancel culture of the present and future? What can we do as readers, teachers, creators and society to preserve the textual values we hold so dear?
John Roskam, to you first on that.
Great question. I think we have to do a couple of things. I think we can't cancel people that we disagree with. We can't cancel people that make us feel uncomfortable. And we can't put ourselves back in the situation of what we might have thought a few hundred years ago. Opinions change, values change, judgments change, and we have to understand that great literature, great art is going to inspire us, make us sometimes feel uncomfortable, sometimes hurt people, sometimes insult us, but understand that is the price of a free society, and the freedom to speak and read is the freedom to think. And I'm concerned about the trend that if something is not liked, if something is of a different standard to what we expect today, admittedly, we'll take it out of libraries, we'll pull down a statue, we won't let people read it.
But some people then will see that and see that it's still available in libraries. There are still the statues there, as a way of us condoning what has happened, and for that literature to get into some hands and be seen as a guidebook for living. This is what Australians are. This is who Australians, what they think. This is how they live their life, and it is not true. We have moved on so far from the literature that you're talking about, and there needs to be new things written. There needs to be new statues built that honour people that reflect our true modern society, and have a disclaimer. If you want to keep those things, make sure there's a disclaimer to say this. A warning, if you like, to say this contains discriminatory, racist language. Proceed with caution.
No, but I agree with you, but I think it has to be there so that we can disagree with it.
Yeah.
The worst thing is to take it away.
But also also to educate.
Yes.
Also as a tool to educate.
To put context around something. Arj?
The high school I went to in California was called Sir Francis Drake High School.
Probably isn't now.
Well, it's not. He was an explorer that discovered the area that I grew up in, and I didn't do very well in high school. But he was recently exposed, or people dug up, that he was also quite a prolific slave trader. And so there was a big uproar in the community, and they henceforth had changed the name after a teacher, Archie Williams, everyone loved him. He was in the Olympics like a long time ago. But anyway, he was a beloved teacher, and they named it. And there was, on social media, there was just battles, I'm still a Drake High School student, I'll never change. And the most common phrase I saw was rewriting history. In my opinion, when you change the name of that high school, you're not rewriting history, you're not erasing history. It was still named Drake for all those years, but now it's not. You're creating new history. And, and because the kids going there, they're teaching equality and all this, and then to go in a building with a guy that was a slave trader, I can understand that. On the other hand, I don't think we should burn books, but I think we should have context in this time. People use these words all the time, like Mark Twain. I read that in context. I don't read that and think, it's okay to, throw these words around.
But sometimes you don't have to read it in historical literature. You just pick up a newspaper and read it in Australia today.
Well, sorry, Missy.
I was going to say, I feel like maybe books and statues are a little bit different. I feel uncomfortable about statues of violent colonialists in our towns who've been proven to have been the catalyst for horrible massacres of First Nations people. So the very idea of having a statue means that it's a heroic kind of form that we look up to.
It's an homage, isn't it?
Yeah, it's an homage. So what a statue represents, I think, is different from what a book represents, which is a historical document.
So just on that, would the context, a plaque at the bottom, be any good, or just get rid of it?
I mean, how amazing would it be if we replaced it with a statue of an incredible Indigenous leader who did so much for his people in the fight for his country hundreds of years ago? I mean, we just don't see that balance of these homages to people, very important people in our history, and it's denying so much of our past.
John?
I'm not sure a statue pays homage, but there's a broader question of we can't transport ourselves back. They are now in the United States removing statues of Thomas Jefferson. He wrote inspiring words and he owned slaves. Now, I am uncomfortable with the idea that we can take that away and we wish we could rewrite history, but we can't.
I'm uncomfortable with the fact that there are still plaques at sites of massacres during the Frontier Wars, and the plaque is a tribute to a police officer who died as a result of an incident with Aborigines in 18 such and such, or whatever the date is. Well, what about the 30, 50, 100 First Nations people who were massacred at that site? There is nothing there for them, but for the one police officer who died during that time, there is a plaque paying tribute to him. I have a problem with that.
Yeah.
Let me ask you just a slightly different issue around cancel culture. This people might have read about it, seen it in the last week or two. The actor Hugh who recently spoke about his experience of being cancelled, essentially, when he agreed to take the part of a transgender character, and there was a campaign successfully mounted arguing that only a trans actor should take such a role. Hugh, what do you think? Is that cancel culture gone?
Yeah, I read that article just before we came on, actually. It's, for me, I think there has to be some kind of space for redemption and learning what you did wrong and then righting your wrongs so we can all learn from it. I think education is really important. I mean, if you're an arsehole, definitely you get cancelled. That's not a, you should just disappear, I think.
But has he done anything wrong here?
I don't know enough about that. I'm going to sound stupid if I try and comment on it because I don't know enough about that space. But I think what he's doing is he's trying to learn more about it, trying to understand more about it, trying to educate himself. And, so many people have read that article and learnt more about that issue. So I think that's a really good thing. And that's the kind of space I'm talking about for redemption. I mean, learning what you've done and then trying to redeem yourself.
And what about as a comic? I mean, is there material that you once would have used that you just can't, that you've had to cancel, essentially?
There's a couple jokes that I look back, knowing what I know now and becoming more aware. I say, I don't want to do that anymore, just for whatever reason. Like, there's one joke I'll even tell you one joke I stopped doing. It was about. Be careful. It was about I offered a girl some wine, and then she said just that much. So I served it to her in a casserole dish. So it'd be a lot more because it's wide. And now, in retrospect, I didn't think that joke aged very well. It feels a little like. It was innocent at the time, or it felt innocent, just a silly joke about. But then looking back, I thought, no, I don't feel that good about that. And I had a partner who helped me come to that conclusion quicker. But you live and learn, and I'm okay with it.
Good. All right. Our next question comes from Jackie Hutchinson.
Hi, great panel tonight. I'm a single mum of 3 amazing children, and during lockdowns had concern over their wavering resilience. So my question is very much to Hugh around computer games particularly. Are they teaching our kids to be less resilient because there's little consequence to actions? So my character dies because I'm failed and I just play again and my character comes back to life.
It's a great question. I think before I talk about resilience, I probably need to just say for any Aboriginal Torres Strait Islanders who are watching, I'm very well aware of the irony of me talking about resilience to you because I'm the most resilient people and culture in the world. So I just want to say that before I kick off my answer. That was my aim to get one clap and I've got it, so I'm very happy. I'm not an expert on computer games, I have to say. I do know that we just did what we had to do to get by the last sort of year and a half and 2 years. I actually feel emotional even just thinking about that question about mental health of young people at the moment because I think I'm still processing what the hell, well, I nearly swore. I think I'm still processing what the hell we just went through the last couple of years, and being from Melbourne, 260-something days of lockdown, I'm still kind of processing it.
Just on that, Hugh, and I know you have spoken a bit about this publicly as well. How did you go in the pandemic?
I pretended I was okay because I was running around Australia I wasn't running around Australia. I was doing interview after interview on how to cope in a challenging time.
You're a resilience coach, you know?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And I was pretending I was fine. And there were warning signs. Like I remember getting angry at my daughter when she was sick because she wasn't sleeping. I'm thinking, I've never been angry at anyone in my entire life. Now I'm angry at my daughter. That's very strange. And I was doing an interview on, it was a talk show. No, it was a breakfast show, radio show. And Dave Hughes he finished the interview. And for context, I'd had I think it was an hour and 20 minutes sleep because of my daughter. But he said, "How are you? You okay?" And I said, "I'm totally and utterly broken." And then I covered my mouth and went, "Oh my gosh, what did I just say to thousands of people?" But the second I admitted that I wasn't coping, I cannot tell you how much better I felt. I knew you were talking about vulnerability before, Narelda, but the power of, just being honest with how you're going, and all of a sudden I was very curious as what can I do to get through this. But so I learned a lot. I saw a psychologist for the first time in my life during lockdown. Never done that before. It was incredible, learnt so much, and then wrote a book about it, which is available at bookstores now. If you're interested. I just noticed I haven't answered anyone's question tonight. I just told stories. This is no, but I just want to say this is what I've learned for your kids. This is a really powerful. What I've learned is the power of gratitude. I've been talking about gratitude for 10 years. If someone said to me 2 years ago, "Are you grateful for your parents?" I would have said, "Of course you are." What a ridiculous question. I didn't realise I wasn't properly grateful until this pandemic hit. I remember my parents were over with mayhem at home with a newborn, and I was like, "Okay, see you guys." I didn't even say thanks for helping look after the kids. And 9 months later, I hadn't seen mum and dad in 2 months, and I'm sitting there at the table. And anyone in Melbourne would know this feeling, but it was dark and cold and miserable, and my kids are crying, and it was just mayhem. And I remember thinking to myself, I just wish mum and dad were here right now. Like, I really want mum and dad here. And then I had this realisation later that night. I just thought, I'm not saying thank God for COVID, but I remember thinking, if it wasn't for COVID, I wouldn't have had that realisation until they were no longer with us. And so I'm not saying thank God for COVID, but I've learnt so much about gratitude. We've got to get paying attention. We've got to get better at paying attention to the stuff that we have. Because we are surrounded by so much good stuff, but we're not paying attention to it. And I think if one thing I've got from this pandemic is, I think we've taken way too much for granted for a long time. The connection, the people we love, We're so lucky to have those people, and we can't take them for granted. And I haven't answered your question about.
Well, let me come back to Jackie's question. It's a very eloquent and insightful answer. Jackie, your question, though, is really about computer games. Can I ask, are your kids spending a lot of time gaming? Is it worrying you?
One son, who will be nameless, would play as much as he would be permitted.
Right.
So he just hates to be distracted from it, and so there's a lot of limit setting and all of that. But yeah, I think to me the challenge for parents is we don't yet know the consequence of a lot of computer and screen time and gaming and watching YouTube. We do know.
I grew up playing video games from a pretty young age,
you're
so
fantastic.
So what I'm saying is, get them off them as soon as you can. You don't want to turn out like this.
But seriously, it's a concern shared by a lot of parents, right? I mean, we got parents sitting around here. John, do you have any views on?
I absolutely share your concerns as the parent of teenage sons. I see that as a Melburnian. One of the most saddest things I saw over the last year was playgrounds surrounded by tape saying "do not enter." We have treated the last 2 years as a technical, scientific question. We've forgotten humanity. I think a large aspect of the responses of governments have been quite inhumane. The interaction that children have had with each other has been over computer screens, has been with a mobile phone. That is not living. And I think whether as parents or grandparents or friends with children, we have a massive job over the years ahead, not just to catch up on the months of education our young people have lost, but to understand that sitting in front of a computer playing Fortnite is not living.
All right. It's been a vulnerable. I think it's been a humane response for the vulnerable people of our society who the elderly or the people who can't get vaccinated for whatever reason. So I do get you.
We're going to get into that. We're going to come to that point, but that was specifically on computer games. I know we went in a few different tangents.
Can I just say one thing about that? I had a lot of the same worries, and a friend of mine actually gave me a book called How to Reset Your Child's Brain. It sounds really extreme, but it's not. It's just, a lot of it is about computer games and what they do to a kid's brain when they're constantly doing that dopamine press over and over and over. And the main thing that I got from it is that you really have to just watch your kid and use your instinct. Like, is this affecting their behaviour? Is it affecting their mental health? And because I gather that some kids can be okay with it and some kids can really suffer mentally. So you probably just use your instinct as a mum.
And look, if this particular discussion raises any issues for you, the numbers for Lifeline and Beyond Blue, they're on your screen. Okay, our next question comes from Sally Groom.
Thank you. Public health orders during a pandemic are actually necessarily extreme, I think. However, the extreme situation we are living through has allowed space for the dangerous infiltration of the mainstream political conversation by neo-Nazi and other far right-wing groups. So why are Conservative commentators not condemning these groups and their violent threats to our democracy?
John, you first on that one.
Oh, thank you for your question, Sally. From my perspective, I see in Victoria over the last 2 years, Parliament shut down. I see a government that's passed a law today that allows indefinite detention without access to a lawyer at the decree of a public servant. I see police that have shot protesters in the back with rubber bullets.
But John, Sally's question is about the violent threats to our democracy. What's your answer to that question?
I went to one of the protests a couple of weeks ago. I saw people who have lost their businesses, who have lost their families, people who have tried to take their own lives. So I think when we're talking about the response to these extreme laws, and I don't share your views that these orders need to be extreme. We need to be able to keep on living. So for me, if you're asking me about the protests,
which is what Sally's asking about. Let's come to that.
I'm going to first say, let's put that in the context of what governments have done to us. At the protests a couple of weeks ago, 100,000 people, two or three people brought paper mache gallows. I don't think we've got any perspective if we're going to focus on that and we're going to forget what governments have done to us. I think if we're talking in the terms you are, what we're doing is delegitimising legitimate protest responding to the real concerns of hundreds of thousands of Australians.
But John, there can be legitimate protests there, but you can also condemn, can't you, the gallows, the nooses, the people saying, I want to see Dan Andrews dangling from a rope, the physical threats to not only him, but the WA Premier, the Northern Territory Chief Minister, they're saying their kids...
David, you absolutely can, and we should, in the same way as we should condemn when Tony Abbott was burned in effigy.
But why does the qualifier have to be there?
Because it's a double standard, David. We should absolutely be focused on extreme elements of the right, extreme elements of the left. But by talking in these terms and focusing on the views of a small number of hundreds of thousands of people, I think basically we're gaslighting the Australian public.
Narelda, I mean, John is right about not everybody at these protests is a violent extremist. What do you say, though, to this question?
I feel that we can be here tonight because we're double vaxxed. We had a certain amount of lockdown. We had all of the measures that were put in place, advised by the chief health officers of all the states and territories. Not so much for the hotel quarantine system, which had numerous breaches, or the vaccine rollout, the initial stages of it. It actually took states and territories to kind of grab hold of the vaccine rollout, and in some cases, in some places like Western New South Wales, during the outbreak, to go door to door to administer those vaccines. It was actually state-run health service providers that ended up doing that, not the federal government. So we're enjoying the freedoms that we are enjoying now because of what was done.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know where to start because I have a lot of feelings about this. I've been here the whole time with you guys, right here in Melbourne, and being a guest in this country, I tend to, follow what the government tells me. I tend to do it, and I know people are angry, and I know they're not all right-wing extremists. I don't agree with those guys that you're talking about at all. People are mad. Even on the way here, we went by. There's still a protest out there in the city. Still a few guys hanging out there, yelling, "Dictator Dan, Dictator Dan." And I just feel like, I didn't say it. I think that's a pretty disrespectful way to refer to Warden Andrews. He's just trying to do his job. And basically, the government screwed up a lot. You pointed that out, but I agree with Narelda that, I believe we went through that because it was like the herd protecting the more, the more susceptible people, and it's sort of like chipping in and do the right thing. It wasn't fun at all. The government tried to make it better. Oh, no international travel, but we'll have a travel bubble between Australia and New Zealand. And, I was impressed. I didn't even know we had that technology. But I think I'll still wait and take an airplane because the bubble's going to take a long time. You ever see how slow a bubble goes? It takes like an hour to cross a children's birthday party. So I don't know what to think of the whole thing. It's a mess. I just hope Omicron doesn't have its way.
Hugh, lockdowns and mandates, particularly around vaccines, have been really polarising issues, right? This year in particular. Do you have any empathy for some of those who've been out protesting?
Well, I did ABC Breakfast News on Tuesday morning and I drove past the Treasury building or Parliament House, wherever the protests were, and I saw them. And my first thing was I felt really angry about it. I was like, what are you doing? This is just ridiculous. It's just a stupid thing. And then I stopped and get a coffee, and one of the guys from the protest came and sat really close to me, and he looked exhausted. And he put his sign down, and it wasn't the nicest sign. It wasn't nasty, but it wasn't. And then I was like, how are you going? And he said, oh, I'm really exhausted. And I said, how come and we chatted about why he was exhausted, how hard he'd been protesting. And then he said, I haven't seen my son in, and he got very teary. He said, I haven't seen my son in a year. And he was really teary. And it just made me realise that I just feel like there's just been this massive missed opportunity to unite us. Like there's this foreign threat, and we could have all been together wanting the best for each other. And, it was almost competitive between states. Like I remember thinking, how's New South Wales got their numbers down? We've done this for ages, and we should be saying that's amazing, good on New South Wales, and amazing Western Australia, well done to them, and they should be cheering us on. But I just feel like we've been divided, and I think what we needed was a really strong leader. And I'm not pointing the finger at Scott. Well, maybe I am, but just a strong leader, to a charismatic, strong leader to really unite us and to get us together and say, hey, we're in this together, because we are. But unfortunately, we've been divided, and I think it's just a huge missed opportunity.
Let's get on to our next question, which comes from Sukan. Yeah, we can give a little applause. 2 applauses. Our next question comes from Suki Singh.
Thank you, David. 489 Aboriginal and Torres Island people have died in the police and prison custody in the last 30 years. Since the Royal Commission made its recommendations to protect Aboriginal lives, according to the latest reports. Why has Australia failed to basically recognize Aboriginal people as the traditional owners of the land we are sitting right now, with a history of over 60,000 years, and denied them equal respect as the rest of the Australians, while US, Canada, and the New Zealand have moved together to recognize Aboriginal people in their respective constitutions? Thank you.
Narelda.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, it's so tragic that 2 women have lost their lives in custody just this week alone. Two First Nations women in the space of 3 days. And those families will be searching for answers for potentially years to come and will still not get answers. Many of those families, of the 489 families, don't have a reason why their loved one died in custody. The reason this keeps happening is not through lack of answers. We've had answers all along. First Nations people have wanted to self-determine we've had reports written. You know, the Deaths in Custody Royal Commission handed down all of those recommendations. The reason why it's still happening is because the colonial patriarchy want to keep us oppressed so that they can maintain the power. We are taking back the power. We are now moving from intergenerational trauma, and there are leaders in every industry, in every sector that are First Nations people. We are now moving from intergenerational trauma into intergenerational power, because we will not stand for the oppression, and we have never ceded our sovereignty, and that is where we are going to be turning it around for ourselves, because governments are not doing it for us.
Look, Sukan referred there to the figure of 489 deaths in custody. That was actually confirmed today in a report from the Australian Institute of Criminology. And as you mentioned, Narelda, we've seen, is it 2 deaths just this week? We had a 43-year-old man a couple of weeks ago in Queensland, 2 men in New South Wales last month. So this is very regular.
Yep.
Why is this still?
Look, I'm just going to say that the solutions that we have, there is already a blueprint written. It's called the Uluru Statement from the Heart. It talks about the incarceration rates and why they're so high, and it's not because Indigenous people are committing serious crimes that warrant them being in jail. Some of these sentences are like 6 months, a few months for very minor things. And I think one of the questions that we should be asking every time: why was the person in custody in the first place? I mean, we know that no one can be imprisoned now in a lot of places for unpayment of fines, for example. The Uluru Statement will lead to, and it should do, an enshrined voice to Parliament. And the voice to Parliament is so important because it can address all the things, all of the gaps that need to be closed. The enshrined voice can advise the government and make it happen, because we need that voice right there.
So, John, do you agree a voice to Parliament could actually help address some of those problems?
It may, but it will undermine what I think is one of the great strengths of this nation, which is equal democracy. We are equal regardless of our ethnic background, regardless of how many generations we are here, regardless of our gender or class. And I think that's more powerful to bring us together than to identify groups of people to overcome disadvantage, absolute disadvantage, and impoverishment and rates of incarceration that are unacceptable. But for me, to divide us like that is not a way forward, and it would divide us forever. I don't think that is a way forward.
But the thing is, when we're not equal, we're not living in an equal society,
Yep.
and First Nations people have never been treated as equal. So I think it's naive in a way to say that when for so many hundreds of years they've been so oppressed as a people that we need the balance to go back the other way now, because we're not living in an equal country, and we need to be.
Yeah, Don, you're kidding yourself. There's an awesome video that I remember seeing of Cathy Freeman winning a race, and she you'll all know this. She I think it was a stall gift actually, and she started way behind the rest of the field, and it was almost an impossible task to be able to win this race. But she came from way behind and sprinted through to the finish line and won the race. That is a metaphor for how unequal we are in this country, because First Nations people and marginalised people have so many more obstacles in their way to be able to achieve the same. And for you to say that we are an equal society...
No, we should aspire to equality.
No, you said that we were equal. You said that
we are equal under the law, and we should be equal.
But we're not equal under the law. We're not. There are so many discretionary powers that police have to arrest people on the street that have done nothing. You know, police are actually using their car as a way to stop people that they suspect, not because they think they've done anything wrong, but just because they're black. That's what happens in this country, John. You know, to be able to say that, you are absolutely kidding.
Look, we are running out of time, and I do want to move to our final question of the night, which comes from Sophie Rees.
Thank you, David. There's so much heartache among us. At the same time, our collective capacity to give to each other of our time and our resources seems diminished. It makes it hard for people to practice those crucial good habits of good mental well-being, like building a support network, like leaning on each other and reaching out for help if we become overwhelmed. In this context where we all have so little to give, how can we support each other back to mental health?
It's a good question, Sophie, and I want to whip around and get some quick thoughts if we can from everyone. Hugh, to you first.
Beautiful question. Beautiful question. Very quickly, we know the rates of mental illness have gone through the roof. There's a group called EDFA, Eating Disorders Families Australia. They look after families affected with eating disorders, and their membership has doubled, which is really sad. And it's not just the families. It's if anyone with a mental illness, you know, it's not just that person who's affected. It's the people who love those people. So the numbers are quite frightening. Empathy. We've got to feel what other people feel, put ourselves in other people's shoes, and do what we can to help people. If we're lucky to be going all right, look out for other people, be there for them.
All right. Narelda.
I'm just going to tell a real quick story, one that was told to me from an elder from home. When the ancestors, and this is something that will give everybody hope, when the ancestors saw the tall ships came, they knew something was wrong, and they sang the spirits down deep into country to protect them. He said to me that those same ancestors are singing again to awaken the spirits. And what we're going through now is an awakening of our country. And if you are not a part of the awakening, then get out of the way.
John.
I think there's not an Australian who hasn't had a personal experience of what all of us have gone through. And as Hugh said, we need to understand we're vulnerable, we've hurt, we're still hurting, but we can repair if we come together and help and respect each other and be there for one another, even if we disagree.
Missy.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree that there needs to be a closing of the divide. I think that we need to start talking to each other. We need to start, as you said, we need to start listening to these protesters and what they're actually going through, rather than just criticise and shout at each other over social media. You know, we are all in this together. This is the first time globally we've ever been experiencing the exact same thing. Well, I don't know. Maybe there's been plagues and everything, but this is the first time in our generations that this has happened. So we need to take this opportunity to realise that we're all one people, and that it's only going to work if we're a cohesive society, a cohesive country, a cohesive world. So there are some really, really important lessons that I feel like it would really benefit us to listen to that have come out of this.
Arj.
I'll keep it as quick as possible. I'll just say, try to go through your day with your heart open and look around and see if someone, say, hey, are you all right? Just like think about everyone else as like we're all human family. I know it sounds a little corny, but it's true. Try to be there for everyone, including strangers, and it makes your day nicer too.
Look, a great question, some great answers to finish the show, finish the series on for this year. In fact, that's all the questions we do have time for. Thanks to our panel, Arj Barker, Missy Higgins, John Roskam, Narelda Jacobs and Hugh van Cuylenburg. Some music from Missy in a moment. Missy, that's your cue to get in place. And thanks to our fantastic studio audience for those questions tonight. Big thanks to all of you. And as mentioned, this is the final Q&A for this year. What a year it has been. Thanks to all of you for watching and shaping the conversations that we have each week here on the show with your stories, with your questions. Stan, Virginia and I all look forward to being back with you next year. But now, the finale we've all been waiting for, Missy Higgins with a song that she wrote for the ABC series Total Control. Ladies and gentlemen, Missy Higgins and her band, Brendan Love, Cameron Dale and Lee Fisher with Edge of Something.
I'm on the edge of something, got an itch in my bones. There's a fire in the middle of my soul. I'm on the edge of something, and it's gonna take time, but I'm doing it for you. No regrets, gonna further to fall when you've hit the bottom. No regrets, I'm a mother's daughter, I got plenty of fight left. I'm on the edge of the unknown. There's a valley of secrets stretched out below, but I got you in my chest, and it's giving me power. Yeah, this kind of love don't rest. No regrets, gonna further to fall when you've hit the bottom. No regrets, I'm a mother with a daughter, I got plenty of fight left. Everybody gonna know my name. I'll be the one with the heart on fire, screaming from the highest stage. Everybody gonna know my name. I'll be the girl who's gonna be everything that's ever made you afraid. Hell have no fury like a woman's rage. Everybody gonna know my name. 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 Everybody gonna know my. We're on the edge of something, but we gotta jump now, 'cause we're doing it for them. We're on the edge of something possibly beautiful, possibly beautiful.